I don't think I can really pinpoint the first time that
I think, yes, I think I like a girl.
I was a lesbian.
Yes, I think I found my girl.
Because I always knew I was different, but it wasn't until...
Yes, I could grow old with her.
And I went to an all-girls school and used to sing in the carol concert every year in the choir. And the older I got, the harder and harder it got for me to feel comfortable at church, because I realized that I was a lesbian. I grew up a bit.
You always taught me.
I was definitely afraid for when my friends found out.
Never knew that certain kinds of
But I was still too afraid to tell my parents, and I felt that I would have to be a bit older to discuss that with them. Even though they're not very religious themselves, I just felt like, you know, it was awkward for me and difficult for me. I felt... And when I did share that with them, I did feel extremely relieved, because I no longer felt like they didn't know who I was anymore.
And please welcome Sherry Kelly. Sherry, how are you today?
I'm well, Scott. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for calling in. I'm really looking forward to talking to you. I came across the movie online on Facebook and Twitter and just kind of fell in love with your project, so I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's talk a little about your background, Sherry. Have you always been interested in the film business, or tell me a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and how you got into the movie making business?
Well, I was not always interested in making movies. I grew up in North Carolina and eventually found my way to Los Angeles, where I was lucky enough to get a position on Paramount Studio Lot, working for the then chairman of Viacom Entertainment Group. And it was during that time working with him, I knew at one point I wanted to do something in the creative end of entertainment, but I wasn't in a big hurry, and I was just waiting for the right time. And
right.
It came when I started hearing about or noticing more the stories of LGBT kids being bullied, sometimes bullied to death because of their sexuality. And in hearing it more and more on the news and reading about it more and more online, I began researching bullying and LGBT kids, and I literally just stumbled upon homeless LGBT kids, and it just went from there. That is when I knew I was ready to do something creative. And it just really went from there. It was a process, though.
That's very cool. Now, that had to take a lot of courage to go from North Carolina to California. That shows you have a lot of faith in yourself. I find that very interesting and very awesome.
Well, no, not really. No. You just, if you want to do it, you do it. You know, you
right.
Pick up, ready to go, and I did. As simple as that.
And I mean, L.A. You see a lot of that. I mean, there's a lot of diversity on the street, and I guess the homeless population of L.A. is pretty huge right now, isn't it?
It is, and it's growing. It's growing everywhere, especially LGBTQ kids, because people, for the most part, aren't really aware. They really are just living in plain sight and completely unnoticed. And their life is a tough one. So, yeah, the homeless LGBTQ kids, homeless population is growing. It's growing every day.
And when you look at the statistics, it's statistics compared to, I mean, homelessness is bad in and of itself, of course, but if you look at the statistics to LGBT to other, I mean, it's just staggering, the differences. Do you have a couple of those stats? I mean, I've read over them, but you might be a little more familiar with them than I am.
Well, basically, there are literally about 1.7 million homeless kids every year. 1.7 million. And of that, 600,000, approximately, maybe a little more, are LGBTQ, identify themselves as LGBTQ. And of that, 40% of those are what we call throwaway kids. They are homeless because they're rejected by their families. And some of them just choose to leave because their home life, once they come out, is just unbearable. I know 1 out of every 4 homeless kids, 1 out of every 4 LGBT kids are homeless the day they come out. They become homeless. So that's a huge number of kids, really more like 680,000 every year. It's not a total population of 680,000. It is 680,000 every year become homeless. And I think a more startling statistic is 1 homeless LGBT kid dies in 4 hours, 6 every day. It is lack of shelter, lack of food, lack of health care, and violence. Take your pick. That's why they're dying. So it is really startling and sad.
And anyone living on the street, I mean, especially youth, are being taken advantage of. But LGBT, from what I read, the homeless youth have been sexually victimized 58.7% of the time, where you said it's only about 33.4% of heterosexual youth, right?
Correct. And for them, finding shelter is more difficult than heterosexual homeless kids, because even if they find a shelter bed, they are more times than not abused within the shelter, even by shelter staff. So for the most part, they prefer to actually trade sex for food and shelter for a night. And when you think a shelter bed or trade sex, we will just trade sex. It's safer. Tells you a lot about the state of shelters for LGBTQ kids.
Oh, that's horrible. And then the suicide rate is, from what I was looking online, 62% of LGBT homeless youth commit suicide, as opposed to 29% of heterosexual, which is a horrible number in and of itself. But you double that, a little over double for LGBT. That's just too many young people losing their lives.
Every day. And when you think about it, and you're talking about Caucasian LGBT kids. For minority LGBTQ homeless kids, it's even worse because they are doubly victimized. They're victimized because of their sexuality, and then they're victimized again because of their race. So, and then transgender kids we haven't talked about. They are really victimized because nobody knows where to put them, and you hear it all the time. Where do they use the bathroom? Where do they sleep? So when the statistics you are naming, you really have to take into account the subgroups within the group. Right.
Yeah, I mean that's so important, because we learned that we're getting a lot more education, a little bit at a time. I mean, we had the Caitlyn Jenner series, and that we're talking about transgender. We found out how much, like you said, turned to sex work just to get by at the time. And then with youth, they don't have that. They don't even have that filter to even know how wrong that really is. I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, they don't have that filter, and they aren't getting direction. Nobody knows about them. I get the impression a lot of times nobody wants to know about them, and I think it's because no one wants to think of a teenager having sex, and nobody really wants to think of a teenager having gay sex. So they're just really marginalized to the breaking point. They really are. And that's one of the reasons A Place Called Home is so important to me. It is to not just bring them into the light and bring attention to them, but, bring about conversation, meaningful conversation, and affect some positive change. Because, 6 kids a day dying, times what, 356 days a year, that's like 2,000 kids, homeless LGBT kids, every day,
right,
that we know about. How many do we not know about?
Exactly. Now, A Place Called Home is the name of the film, and you were producer of it. Now, how did this come about? You have the writer, Dio Anthony. Did he have the project already done and come to you, or you found him, or did you inspire him to write this, or how did this whole project come about now?
I found him after I started researching and I stumbled on homeless LGBTQ youth. I really started reading more about them, their stories. And as I was reading about them, the outline for A Place Called Home was taking place, and the general outline, then the characters came about. And once I knew the sort of story I wanted to tell and the characters that I had in mind, I started searching for writers, and it was a long process finding writers. I found they could tell me the statistics, and they could intellectualize it, but they weren't really feeling it emotionally. And then I was enough to find Dio, and he just got it right off the bat. He just got it. And we worked a long time on script. Sometimes I would just back away because it's emotionally taxing when you are hearing about it every day. This is what your job is, homeless LGBT kids, and what they're going through, and it takes a toll sometimes. So I would back away frequently, and then we'd go back to it and start again. It took some time, but he turned out to be just an amazing young writer. He really did.
That's fantastic. I can imagine that it's really got to take a toll on you, not only hearing the stats, but then knowing there's really not that much you can do alone. I mean, this is something you're trying to do for it, but just to hear that, I can imagine that'd be very overwhelming to have to process.
It was. And, some people would say, well, you just have to, you can't take it personally. But I thought, well, I'm human, and yes, I do take it personally. I do feel it. And I don't want to not feel it. I wouldn't, no. But it took longer that way.
And so now you and Dio have created a story. Now tell the story. It's not documentary-like. It's more actually a story inspired by everything, all these stats that you came across, right? Or tell us more about the story now.
A Place Called Home is a fictionalized account of a 16-year-old girl by the name of Allie, and what it was like for her for her sexuality and accept it, and the harsh reality of what she had to go through every day in her journey to find herself, to find a place to call home, actually. And it's a harsh story at times because these kids' lives are harsh. It's very realistic. I didn't sugarcoat it because there's nothing sweet about these kids' lives ever.
Right.
And in doing so, Allie goes through everything that an actual homeless LGBT kid would go through. Nothing about what she goes through is easy. It was tough. There are bright spots where you laugh. There are times when you feel so bad for her you cry. And there are times when you just get really pissed off at the system.
Wow, that's so powerful. Then how did you brought another person aboard? You brought Jolene. How did Jolene come into your picture there?
She we found each other on Facebook, just talking back and forth and tweeting, just kind of like how you found me. And she and I she got it. She is very smart. She's very creative. And yes, she has a master's in business as well. We work very well together in bringing the project along. She has been a bright spot for me.
That's terrific, and that's Jolene Wolf. So now you have your core team together. How did you go? How was it being a producer? Was this your first time producing? Was it a little overwhelming, or did you kind of have locations in your mind and casting, and how did all that happen?
Well, and all of that hasn't happened. It's hard to get casting when you don't have the funding, so that is where we are now. But at the same time, when I was planning the script, planning the story, doing the outline, and writing it with Dio, we could see it takes place in New York City, and it took place in New York City because it is such a vibrant city. People live on the street, and you bump into people. It's more interactive than, say,
right.
L.A., because people walk everywhere. So I knew I wanted it to be there. I knew I wanted public transportation needed to be very readily accessible to her, because she ends up, like a lot of homeless people, utilizing public transportation as a place to lay her head and to get warm because you don't have a safe shelter.
So you're still totally in the funding stage right now. We haven't been able to get to the actually even getting to the locations and to the casting yet, because we still got to get the money together to get the film off the ground, right?
And we just really started that just in the past few days. So it's a process, and that saying where there's people work a long time to be an overnight success is really the truth. It's really the truth.
Right.
To get the screenplay where you want it and to be comfortable with it and to just start building a infrastructure with getting to know people online, reaching out to people, having people start to know you in that respect. It is time-consuming, and it is a job, and you have to be prepared to literally let it take over you and to just go with it. And if you want to succeed, you can't be afraid, and you can't give in. You just have to have blinders on every day.
Exactly, and I really appreciate you taking this on, because this is something that definitely needs to be told, and it's really a story that I really hope gets out there. Like I said, I found you. I think you're doing a great job on your Facebook and Twitter promoting it. I did see you just started that funding the other day for it on one of the crowdfunding sites, and it's so important of a film that I really hope we can get the work out and get some money for it. Do you have a kind of a budget in mind yet?
Well, when I was looking for, and we talked about this, crowdfunding sites, we really didn't want to have to say, we have X amount of time to do this and to lock ourselves into a time frame. We found one where literally it is open. The funding goes on until it's completed, and we're looking at in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, and that of course is with a lot of people donating their time, people being deferred payment, people taking less money. It even then it's going to be tight, but you can do it.
Yeah, because that's a very modest, meager budget in today's movie-making world. Obviously, I mean, that's working your butt off to the ground, your fingers to the bone there, right?
People do it all the time, and that is our minimum. Hopefully, if we go over, we will take it. And
well, I'm real excited that we're getting in on the kind of the ground floor of this project. I know you've been working on this, been consuming your life for a couple of years now, but this is the first that you're really getting out there and getting some money. I'm glad that I was able to hear about it, and I really want to help promote this through all of our listeners, and we'll sure to put it on our Facebook. Now, you guys have Facebook, Twitter. Why don't you go ahead and give how people can get in touch with you on social media?
Well, our Facebook page is facebook.com /ATCH the movie. And our Twitter handle is the same thing, ATCH the movie.
And where, if they want to get in contact with you, do you have a email address for your production company? Anyone out there, any of our wealthy friends that none of us know about, listening to the Left of Straight show today, where can they contact you by email, or do you have a website yet?
I have a website, and there's a contact form there. The website is a place called homethemovie.com. And there's a contact form that comes right into my email.
Terrific. Well, I hope that we'll be able to kind of keep in touch, because I think this is a very big project that I would like to be a part of and help promote as much as possible. I'll make sure I share this on all my social media. But I think this is a great project. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to stop for a second here, and I'm going to, at the end of our talk here, I'm going to put the trailer that you have online, because there's a small little trailer talking about what the project should be about with a little narrative.